On how to be a great teammate and a great leader and show up every single day for them.
Caitlin, what's that next step for you as a player?
Well, I mean, I've only played 60 WNBA games, so I've got a ways to go still, and
The footage dropped and people could not stop watching it. A simple training camp clip, no game on the line, no crowd in the seats, just Caitlin Clark on a practice floor in Indianapolis wearing a Fever jersey for the first time since the summer of 2025. And within the first few seconds of that clip, she did something that sent the entire internet into a frenzy. She caught a ball one-handed with her right hand, the ball coming at her off an angle that most players would have let bounce away or stopped play to reset. And in one completely fluid motion, she turned that catch directly into a pass to Myisha Hines-Allen in the paint. No hesitation, no moment of deliberation, no reset, just catch, read, deliver. And Hines-Allen finished the layup looking visibly stunned at what had just found her hands. The reaction on Hines-Allen's face became the second story of the clip. She looked at Clark with an expression that fans immediately recognized from a different context. They started calling it the Jonquil look, referencing the face that New York Liberty center Jonquil Jones made at Clark during the 2024 All-Star Game after an extraordinary pass. The same involuntary, wide-eyed reaction that says I did not expect that to happen, and I have been in this league long enough to know that what I just witnessed is not normal. That clip was the opening act of what turned out to be one of the most closely watched first days of training camp in recent WNBA history. And what followed was not just a moment, it was an entire afternoon of footage, reactions, drama, and storylines that made it absolutely clear the 2026 Indiana Fever are a different team, operating at a different level with a different kind of purpose than anything this franchise has shown before. The context that makes all of this footage hit so differently is everything that happened in the 12 months before it. Caitlin Clark's 2025 season was one of the most painful individual storylines in recent professional basketball. She played 13 games, 13 in a 44-game regular season as the most watched player in the league, surrounded by expectations that had been building since her record-breaking college career. She played 13 games. A strained left quad knocked her out early. A groin injury in July ended everything. The Fever spent the rest of the season fighting without her, somehow dragging themselves all the way to the WNBA semifinals, losing to the Las Vegas Aces in overtime in Game 5 of a series that went the full 5 games despite having Clark, Sophie Cunningham, Sydney Colson, Ari McDonald, Chloe Bibby, and Damiris Dantas all out with injuries at various points. And in the final moments of that Game 5 loss, Kelsey Mitchell collapsed to the floor and had to be taken to the hospital with rhabdomyolysis, a serious condition caused by muscle breakdown from overuse. Multiple players in that building were injured in the process of trying to reach a finals they nearly made without their best player. So when training camp for 2026 opened at Gainbridge Fieldhouse on April 19th, the weight behind that first day was not just excitement. It was relief, hunger, and something that felt very close to purpose. This team had unfinished business in a way that was almost physical in its intensity. Clark was the first one on the floor. She was putting up shots before practice officially started, before the equipment was fully set up, before all the cameras were positioned, before the full roster had finished getting their new practice jerseys from the rack along the sideline. She was just out there shooting. That image alone told you everything you needed to know about where her head was entering this camp. She had declared herself 100% healthy with no restrictions. She had already competed for Team USA in Puerto Rico in March, averaging 11.6 points and 6.4 assists per game over 5 games in the FIBA World Cup qualifying tournament and walked away with tournament MVP honors. She had played pickup constantly throughout the offseason, running live 5-on-5 every chance she got because skill workouts eventually get boring and she just needed to compete. She arrived at training camp not as someone trying to find her way back. She arrived as someone who had spent 8 months building toward a specific moment and was now fully inside it. And the footage that came out of day 1 reflected exactly that energy. The one-handed catch and pass to Myisha Hines-Allen was the clip that broke through first and hit the widest audience. But the reactions it generated deserve as much attention as the play itself. Fans who had been watching Clark since her Iowa days immediately recognized the move as characteristically Clarkian, the kind of instinctive no-look read that looks spontaneous but is actually the product of thousands of hours of practice developing passing instincts that most point guards in any league simply do not have. The comment that referenced the Jonquil look was everywhere within an hour. One fan wrote that the look on Hines Allen's face after converting the finish was their favorite part of the entire clip. The expression of someone who has just processed something unexpected and is recalibrating their understanding of what they are going to be working with every day this season. Another fan noted that this was Clark's first training camp in a Fever jersey, operating with a full, healthy roster around her, and the results were already showing. A third simply posted that the WNBA better be ready. None of those reactions were hyperbole. They were accurate assessments of what the footage actually showed. A player whose instincts had not diminished over 8 months away from competition, arriving at day one with a level of sharpness that her own teammates were visibly caught off guard by. But the footage was not all highlight reel moments. The Fever also released blooper content from day one, and Clark's natural personality came through in those clips in a way that resonated differently but equally strongly with the fan base. She was loose, she was laughing, she was genuinely at ease in a way that the Caitlin Clark who spent all of 2025 watching her team play without her could not have been. There is a version of a returning player that comes back from a long absence with visible anxiety. Tight, cautious, overthinking every movement, haunted by the injury that took them away. That was not what the day one footage showed. What it showed was someone who had done the work, processed the experience, arrived at acceptance and motivation simultaneously, and was now operating from a place of genuine joy about being back on a basketball court. The blooper content showed her laughing at herself after a drill did not go exactly right. It showed her goofing around with teammates in the brief pauses between sets. It showed the specific quality of looseness that indicates a player is not carrying mental weight into their movements. The complete opposite of someone bracing for another injury and playing scared. Whatever Caitlin Clark did between July 2025 and April 2026 to get her mind right alongside her body, the footage from day one showed that it worked. The broader team picture that emerged from day one footage was just as compelling as the individual Clark moments. Coach Stephanie White had been clear in the weeks leading up to camp about the specific things she wanted this team to look different at in 2026. Pace. The Fever were going to play faster. They were going to be more aggressive in transition, more decisive in their decision making, more relentless in the way they pushed from one end to the other without letting the defense get set. The footage from the opening practice reflected that emphasis immediately. Assistant coach Brianne January led the team through defensive drills from the very first whistle. Not offensive concepts, not spacing work, not shooting sets, but defense. Hard, focused, competitive defensive repetitions with the players cheering each other after strong efforts and competing at an intensity level that felt like regular season basketball from the very first day. White had identified defense and rebounding as the areas where the Fever needed to grow most, and the decision to start camp on the defensive end sent a message about priorities that the roster received clearly. Aaliyah Boston, who signed the highest total value contract in WNBA history at $6.3 million over 4 years just weeks before camp, talked about Monique Billings fitting perfectly into the front court group, specifically praising her rebounding and her ability to run the floor. Billings, who came over from the Golden State Valkyries, gave Indiana a physical interior presence that addressed a specific weakness from previous years. The new pieces were not just filling roster spots, they were filling functional gaps in a system that White had identified and targeted with precision. And then there was the other footage from day one that generated a completely different kind of conversation. A clip surfaced on social media showing the Fever players high-fiving each other during a drill rotation. And some fans, many fans, actually zeroed in on a specific moment where Raven Johnson appeared to move out of the way as Clark approached. The interpretation of that moment ignited a debate that the internet was already primed to have. The history between Clark and Johnson was well documented. The 2023 Final Four, the wave off, Johnson's admission that the moment made her want to quit basketball, the viral clip that had chased Johnson for years before she eventually used it as fuel to win a national championship and become the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. When the Fever drafted Johnson with the 10th pick in the 2026 WNBA draft, the fan base had been divided from the moment the announcement came. Some loved the addition of a two-time national champion with elite defensive credentials. Others were immediately skeptical about whether the locker room dynamic could function smoothly. The day one high five clip became a flashpoint for everyone who had already been looking for evidence to support whatever position they had already staked out. Some fans took it as confirmation that there was real tension. Others insisted it was a completely normal and meaningless moment in the flow of a practice drill that people were reading far too much into. The debate was loud and the takes came fast. But the most credible voice on the topic had already weighed in, and she was unequivocal. Aaliyah Boston, who had played with Johnson at South Carolina from 2021 to 2023 and who has been Clark's closest teammate for 2 seasons, had said on her podcast before camp even started that fans always have more beef than the players do. She said it was going to be fine. She said when you are in the gym and you are ready to compete, that is all it comes down to. That assessment from someone with direct knowledge of both players was the most informed take available, and Johnson herself had been quoted saying Clark was a phenomenal player with a winning mentality and she could not wait to be her teammate. The clip was the kind of thing that fuels YouTube videos and Twitter threads for days. Whether it reflected anything real happening inside that building was a separate question entirely. What the complete picture of day one footage from Indiana Fever training camp ultimately revealed was a team that had arrived at this moment fully loaded and fully aware of what they were chasing. Clark healthy and electrifying, Boston locked in and operating with the expanded role that White had designed around the Nikola Jokic facilitation model. Mitchell back after being hospitalized at the end of last season, now on a supermax contract that signaled Indiana's commitment to keeping their core together. Cunningham back after the MCL tear, saying the 1-year contract had lit a fire under her. Hull back on a multi-year deal, part of the Tres Leches trio alongside Clark and Cunningham that had become one of the most recognizable personality combinations in the entire league. New pieces like Billings, Harris, Hines-Allen, and Johnson adding dimensions the roster had lacked. A coaching staff entering year 2 with White at the helm, now with the full benefit of understanding exactly what this group is and what it needs. And above all, a competitive hunger that was visible in every single clip released from day one, in the way they ran defensive drills from the first whistle, in the way they cheered for each other after strong reps, in the way Clark was already on the floor shooting before anyone told her practice was starting. This Indiana Fever team did not come to training camp in 2026 to figure things out. They came to finish something they started 2 years ago. And if the footage from day one is any indication of how that is going to look, the WNBA has every reason to be paying very close attention to what is being built inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse right now.